The emperor is 56 kilometers away when his capital catches fire. He rushes back, opens his private gardens to refugees, slashes the price of grain, and personally directs the firefighting effort for 9 days. 2,000 years later, history remembers him as the man who played the fiddle while Rome burned. The fiddle will not be invented for another 1,000 years. The fire starts in a row of shops beside the Circus Maximus on the night of July 18, 64 AD. It will burn for 9 days. It will destroy 10 of Rome's 14 districts. It will leave hundreds of thousands homeless in a city of 1 million. And when it is over, the emperor will build himself a golden palace on the ashes, blame an obscure religious sect for the disaster, and launch a persecution so brutal that it will accidentally transform that sect into the most powerful institution on earth.
Almost everything you think you know about the Great Fire of Rome is wrong. The truth is worse. My name is Arthur Graves, and through advanced AI reconstruction technology, I am standing at the southeastern end of the Circus Maximus in Rome at approximately 2 in the morning on July 19, 64 AD. The air smells like dry straw, animal dung, and cheap cooking oil. It is the middle of a Roman summer, which means weeks of heat with no rain. Behind me is the Circus Maximus itself, a stadium that seats 250,000 people for chariot races, built mostly of wood. Either side of me, crammed against the stadium walls, are rows of small shops selling lamp oil, dried grain, cloth, and other flammable goods. This is the most dangerous intersection in the ancient world. And in roughly 2 hours, it is going to prove it. If you stay until the end of this video, I will show you what these locations look like today.
And what Nero built on the ashes. To understand why this fire destroys Rome, you need to understand how Rome is built. In 64 AD, the city holds between 800,000 and 1 million residents, making it the largest city in the Western world by a factor of 10. The problem is that this population is squeezed into roughly 13 square kilometers of buildable land inside the Aurelian boundaries. That is a population density roughly equivalent to modern-day Mumbai or Dhaka. The wealthy live in single-family homes called domus, usually 1 or 2 stories, built from stone and brick. There are approximately 1,800 of them. Everyone else, meaning over 95% of the population, lives in insulae. Rome has 46,602 of them. An insula is essentially a Roman apartment block. The ground floor is commercial, bakeries, wine shops, taverns, and workshops, all using open flames. The upper floors are residential. A typical insula holds 40 to 50 people in roughly 330 square meters. The bottom floors are built from concrete and brick. The upper floors, where the poorest tenants live, are built from timber and dried mud brick. Rent decreases with altitude, which means the cheapest apartments are also the most flammable and the farthest from the exit. Augustus had set a legal height limit of about 20 meters, roughly 7 stories. Builders ignored it. Some insulae reached 9 stories. The poet Juvenal, writing about life in Rome during this period, describes buildings held together by flimsy bits of wood, with cracks in the walls that the landlord papered over and called repairs.
I want to put this in perspective. Imagine a city where 95% of the housing stock is built from materials that would fail every modern fire code on Earth, where the streets between buildings are narrower than a standard car, where every kitchen uses open flames, where the water supply stops at the 2nd floor, and where the fire department fights fires with buckets, blankets, and vinegar. Now fill that city with 1 million people in the middle of a drought. That is Rome in July of 64 AD. The question is not whether this city will burn. The question is how it has survived this long without burning. The fire begins in the shops clustered against the southern wall of the circus.
Tacitus, The Roman historian, whose account is our most reliable source, describes the fire starting among flammable goods stored in merchant stalls. Summer winds funnel through the valley and drive the flames along the full 600-meter length of the circus. Within the first hour, the entire southern end of the stadium is engulfed. The fire reaches the densely packed insulae on the slopes of the Caelian Hill and begins climbing. What happens next is a lesson in physics. Large fires generate their own wind. As the flames heat the air above them, hot air rises rapidly, pulling cooler air in from the sides. This creates a self-sustaining convection cycle that can produce wind speeds of 40 to 60 kilometers per hour, feeding itself with fresh oxygen and accelerating beyond any human capacity to control it. Embers carried by these self-generated winds land on buildings dozens of meters ahead of the main fire front, igniting new blazes in structures that have had no direct contact with the flames. Witnesses will later describe fires appearing to start spontaneously in houses far from the main conflagration, as if invisible hands were setting them. This is not arson, this is thermodynamics. But the people of Rome do not have that word. What they have is suspicion. The Vigiles, Rome's firefighting force, respond immediately. There are approximately 7,000 of them, organized into 7 cohorts, each responsible for 2 of Rome's 14 districts. They are freedmen, former slaves, and they are the closest thing the ancient world has to a professional fire department. Their equipment consists of buckets, hand-operated water pumps, blankets soaked in vinegar, axes, and hooks for pulling down buildings to create fire breaks. They have no fire hydrants. They have no hoses. The city's 9 aqueducts deliver water to public fountains and baths, but the system is not designed for firefighting. The Vigiles are brave, trained, and completely overwhelmed.
I am watching the Vigiles work, and it is genuinely heartbreaking. These men are running into 3-meter-wide alleys between burning buildings with buckets of water. The buildings on either side of them are 6 stories of dry wood. The heat is so intense that the air itself shimmers. They are trying to create fire breaks by demolishing buildings in the fire's path with axes and siege equipment, which is actually sound firefighting strategy, identical to what modern forest fire crews do. But the alleys are too narrow for the equipment.
The fire is moving faster than they can demolish. And some of the groups tearing down buildings are not Vigiles at all. Some are looters who have figured out that a building that has been knocked down is a building that can be robbed. And some of these looters, Tacitus reports, claim they are acting under orders. Whose orders? They never say. Emperor Nero is not in Rome when the fire starts. He is 56 kilometers away at his villa in Antium, the modern city of Anzio, on the coast south of Rome. This is not unusual. July in Rome is brutal, and emperors routinely retreat to coastal properties during the summer months. When news of the fire reaches Nero, he returns immediately to the city. According to Tacitus, the most reliable of the 3 historians who document the fire, Nero takes personal charge of the relief effort. He opens his private gardens on the Vatican Hill to shelter refugees. He opens public buildings across the city as emergency housing. He arranges for food to be brought from the port of Ostia, 25 kilometers away, and orders the price of grain reduced to 1/4 of a sesterce per pound, well below market rate, to prevent famine. This is the part that almost nobody talks about. The popular image of Nero during the Great Fire is of a madman playing a lyre on a hilltop while his city burns. The phrase "to fiddle while Rome burns" has entered every European language as a metaphor for criminal negligence, except the fiddle will not be invented for another 1,000 years. The story of Nero performing while Rome burned comes primarily from Suetonius and Cassius Dio, both of whom wrote decades after the event, both of whom were hostile to Nero, and neither of whom was alive when the fire occurred. Tacitus, who was 8 years old at the time of the fire and later had access to official records, says Nero was not even in the city when it started. What Tacitus does mention is that Nero may have sung a private composition about the fall of Troy while watching the flames from a distance. Not while the city burned. After. And not in celebration, but as an artistic response to a catastrophe he found overwhelming.
History is written by the winners, and Nero lost. He lost so badly that the Senate declared him a public enemy, forced to flee Rome, and he committed suicide 4 years after the fire by stabbing himself in the throat with a dagger. The people who replaced him had every reason to make him look as terrible as possible. The fiddle did not exist in 64 AD. Nero played the cithara, a type of Greek lyre. Turning that into fiddle while Rome burns is the ancient equivalent of a political attack ad that runs for 2,000 years. But it works because it is a better story than the truth. The truth is more complicated and, honestly, more interesting.
The fire burns for 6 days before being brought under control. Then it reignites and burns for another 3. 9 days total. When it finally dies out, 10 of Rome's 14 districts are damaged. 3 districts are completely leveled to the ground. 7 more are reduced to ruins. Only 4 districts escape without damage. The 800-year-old Temple of Jupiter Stator, one of the oldest religious buildings in Rome, is gone. The Atrium Vestae, the sacred hearth of the Vestal Virgins, where a fire has been kept burning continuously for centuries as a symbol of Rome's eternal survival, is destroyed. The irony is staggering. Nero's own palace, the Domus Aurea, which connected his residences on the Palatine Hill to the Gardens of Maximus on the Esquiline Hill, is also destroyed. If Nero started the fire to clear land for a new palace, he started it on the opposite side of the city from where he wanted to build, and burned down his own house in the process. This is either the worst arson plan in history or evidence that the fire was exactly what Tacitus suspected. An accident in a city that was essentially designed to burn. Hundreds of thousands of Romans are now homeless. They camp in the Campus Martius, in cemeteries, in the gardens of the wealthy. Others simply wander the streets in shock. The social fabric of the world's greatest city has been torn apart in 9 days. And then Nero does something that will define his legacy more than the fire itself. He starts building. On the land cleared by the fire, Nero begins construction of the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It is not a palace. It is a country estate, built in the middle of a city. It covers between 100 and 300 acres, depending on which historian you ask, stretching from the Palatine Hill to the Esquiline Hill, with an artificial lake in the valley between them, landscaped gardens, vineyards, pastures, and a main entrance hall containing a colossal bronze statue of Nero himself, standing 30 meters tall. The dining rooms have ceilings made of ivory panels that rotate to shower guests with flowers and perfume. The walls are covered in gold leaf and studded with gemstones. A popular lampoon circulates through Rome. The whole city has become a house. Romans migrate to Veii, unless the house swallows Veii too. The Domus Aurea is so extravagant that after Nero dies, his successors will tear most of it down. The Flavian dynasty fills in the artificial lake and builds the Colosseum on top of it. The name Colosseum probably comes from Nero's colossal statue, which stood nearby for centuries after his death.
Let me make sure you understand what just happened. The most destructive fire in Roman history leaves hundreds of thousands homeless. The emperor builds himself a 300-acre luxury estate on the burned land, while refugees are still living in tents. Whether he started the fire or not is almost irrelevant. The optics are catastrophic. Imagine the mayor of a modern city losing half the housing stock to a disaster, and then building a private golf course on the ruins. Now imagine that the disaster might have been caused by the mayor's own negligence. That is the situation Nero is in. And he knows it. He needs someone else to blame. He finds the Christians.
In 64 AD, Christianity is a small, obscure religious sect, probably numbering a few thousand followers in Rome. They are already distrusted by the general population because they meet in secret, refuse to participate in public religious ceremonies, and speak of an approaching day of judgment, when the world will be consumed by fire. That last detail is unfortunately timed. Nero accuses them of starting the Great Fire and unleashes a persecution of extraordinary cruelty. According to Tacitus, Christians are sewn into animal skins and torn apart by dogs in public arenas. Others are crucified. Others are coated in pitch and set on fire to serve as human torches to light Nero's garden parties at night. Jerome, a later Christian writer, estimates that 979 Christians were killed in the persecution. The brutal irony is that this persecution, intended to destroy Christianity, does the opposite. The courage of the martyrs inspires new converts. The stories of their suffering spread across the Roman Empire. The apostles Peter and Paul are both traditionally believed to have been executed during this persecution, Peter by crucifixion and Paul by beheading. The sites of their deaths become pilgrimage centers. Centuries later, the Vatican, the global headquarters of the Catholic Church, is built on the hill where Peter was buried, directly above Nero's circus, where Christians were executed. The emperor who tried to extinguish Christianity created the geographic foundation of its most powerful institution.
Think about that. Nero persecutes a few thousand followers of an obscure sect to distract from a fire. 2,000 years later, 1.4 billion Catholics on earth trace their spiritual authority directly back to a man Nero executed on that hill. The Colosseum stands where Nero's lake was. The Vatican stands where Nero's victims were buried. Nero tried to erase them. They erased him. His golden house is underground, buried beneath the bathhouses his successors built on top of it. You can visit it on weekends. It is damp, dark, and crumbling. His colossal statue is gone. His name is a synonym for insanity. Every single thing Nero built to immortalize himself has been demolished, repurposed, or forgotten. Every single thing he tried to destroy has survived. Now I want to bring you into the present and show you what these locations look like today.
The Circus Maximus, where the fire began, is today an open grassy field between the Palatine and Aventine hills. Almost nothing survives above ground. Romans use it as a park. On a summer evening, you can stand in the middle of the field and realize you are in the exact spot where the fire started nearly 2,000 years ago. There is no memorial, no plaque, just grass, where a fire erased 8 centuries of history. The Domus Aurea was buried by Nero's successors and rediscovered accidentally in the 15th century when a young Roman fell through a hole in the ground into a painted room. Renaissance artists, including Raphael, lowered themselves on ropes to study the frescoes by torchlight. The decorative style they found, which they called grotesque because they thought they were in grottos, directly influenced Renaissance art across Europe. Today, the surviving sections are open on weekends, accessible through the Appian Hill Park. Nero's 300-acre estate is now underground corridors that tourists walk through wearing hard hats. The Colosseum, built on the site of Nero's artificial lake, needs no introduction. It is the most visited monument in Italy and one of the most recognizable structures on Earth. But most visitors do not realize they are standing in what was once the private garden of an emperor who may have burned down his own city. The connection between the Great Fire, the Domus Aurea, the artificial lake, and the Colosseum is a single narrative that spans 20 years and 3 dynasties. The fire created the space. Nero filled it with a palace. The Flavians tore down the palace and gave the space back to the people as an amphitheater. It is the most expensive game of demolition and reconstruction in ancient history. And the Vatican, built on the hill where Nero executed Christians to deflect blame for the fire, is today the smallest independent state in the world and the administrative center of a religion with over 1 billion followers. Every pope, every cardinal, every papal decree traces its geographic authority to that hill, which is that hill because Nero put a circus there and killed people in it. The Great Fire of Rome did not just destroy a city, it created the physical and spiritual geography of Western civilization.
I am standing in the Forum, or what is left of it. The fire passed through here nearly 2,000 years ago, but the stones under my feet are the same stones that Roman senators walked on when they debated whether to blame Nero or believe him. Somewhere beneath the Oppian Hill behind me, Nero's golden house is still down there, buried, painted, waiting. The Colosseum fills the valley where his lake was. The Vatican rises on the hill where his victims burned. Every tourist who visits Rome walks through the aftermath of 9 days in July of 64 AD without knowing it. The fire is still shaping this city. Nero is still shaping this city. He just does not get credit for it anymore. If you found this investigation as gripping as I did, like this video and subscribe. I am Arthur Graves, and I will see you at the next investigation.